Hey, Hashinshin Shinies. Today we are going to talk about the removal of the Mythic system. What has that meant for League? Was it good? Was it bad? What has it changed? Is the game better now? We're just going to talk about everything of that until I get bored of hearing my own voice, at which point I will end the video, however long that may take me. In front of you are plays. I don't think I had my best day today. You know, I do try to put plays in front of you, but a lot of times, like when I look back at my plays, my first thoughts are always like, oh, I did that bad. Oh, I could have done that better. Like I'm always kind of like embarrassed of like watching my own plays. That's one reason why I've never really done gameplay. The second reason is it takes me like an additional hour every single time to edit this. Like I stream for an hour, or sorry, 8 hours plus, then I edit this for an hour, then I record this and I do takes of this video, which could take up to an hour. At the end of the day, I end up getting very little free time to myself to do what I want. If you want to see a video a day, do you know what you could do? You go into that description and you go to Hashinshin Patreon and go there and subscribe, and that helps me be able to do what I do, which is give you guys daily content. Okay, anyway, let's get into the entire video. Mythic item changes. What has that done for League of Legends? Okay, well, let's be blunt. I don't think it actually has changed that much. The reason I don't think it's changed that much is, other than the Mythic passive removal, Riot effectively went through and put a bunch of Mythics into the game that are basically required for each class anyway. Now I'll go through each class and what I think their effective, Mythics are. But I do think removing the Mythic passive system was good for the game as a whole. I'm going to be blunt. I think they could have kept the Mythic system if they just removed the Mythic passives to begin with. I think for the most part, that was like the majority of the problem, especially because of how Mythic passives worked. I don't think that was very good for League of Legends. To be blunt, like, okay, so you get 2% movement speed on your Mythic passive. So I mean, to get 8% movement speed on 5 items. That just seems like a lot of movement speed, right? Or you get 5 ability haste and 5 movement speed. So you get 20 ability haste, 20 movement speed, right? Like you're stacking a lot of one stat onto your champion, which causes an inflation of that stat, whatever that stat might be. Is it damage? Then you probably end up with too much damage. Is it ability haste? Then you probably end up with too much ability haste. Right? Stayed away from giving armor and magic resist on Mythic passives, because, if you give armor and magic resist on a Mythic passive, you ended up with characters who would bloat out and be too tanky later in the game. The Iceborne Gauntlet one, I think, was particularly problematic, in my opinion, because Kosante ending up with 200 health, 20% tenacity, 20% slow resist, and that was the actual numbers, by the way. At 5 items, Iceborne Gauntlet gave you, just on its Mythic passive, 200 health, 20% tenacity, and 20% slow resist. If you ever wondered why Iceborne Gauntlet was absolutely nutty and why so many champions could use that item so well, at any rate, I think removing the Mythic passive was just really good for the game as a whole, and they probably should have done that a very long time ago. That just needed to happen. But let's talk about the Mythic items themselves. Was removing Mythics really that big a deal? Did it benefit the game? Once again, I'm going to say no. And again, that's just because I think every class has a Mythic that they need to go anyway. I think removing the Mythic item system actually hurt things potentially in the long run, because now like, what's the right way to put it? It's like, if 2 or 3 items were Mythics, then Riot could ensure that you couldn't combine those items, right? Riot could ensure you couldn't combine, for example, Stridebreaker and Gore Drinker, right? They could ensure that you couldn't combine Leandries and Ludens. And nowadays we're seeing a lot of items being combined that, wow, when they get combined, they kind of break the game. They're not exactly the same item, but when you combine those items, they end up being a little bit too much. I think the biggest one that Riot has to deal with right now is Lichbane Storm Surge. That's really a very big one that a lot of people are going, on. You combine one burst item with another burst item, and at 2 items, mages are kind of killing everybody. They've basically had to nerf. They basically had to nerf Storm Surge into the ground, just because we saw Fizz and Akali and Twisted Fate. They were all going Storm Surge Lichbane, and they were just, you know, when you combine 2 Gigaburst items, it just ended up being too much. Obviously, it ended up being too much. And that problem would not have occurred with the Mythics item system. Another problem that we're seeing is like when you have multiple items that scale really, really well together, it ends up being, again, a bit too much. For example, when you have Serilda's, which scales with lethality, and Profane Hydra, which scales with damage, and, you know, at 3 items, those 2 items, as you'll probably see it throughout this video, you get absolutely silly amounts of damage. You get damage that really shouldn't be in the game. Particularly Profane Hydra and Lichbane, those 2 have really made me question, like, Riot wanted champions to kill you on their abilities. They didn't want champions to kill you on the items, right? They didn't want, quote, they don't want champions to be item delivery systems, right? They don't want Corki just going Eclipse, Man Immune, Malignant, and his rockets just proc those items, and all his damage is coming from items and not from his own kit. But as you'll see on a lot of these plays, boy, I kind of, in a lot of these plays, I'm not saying all of them, but in a lot of them, I kind of just run up, auto attack, Profane Hydra, hit maybe like the Q3, and people are dead. And it just feels like, I went over this in my other video, but man, it just feels like, definitely you look at Lichbane, and there's still a lot of item damage in the game. Now, like, I understand that on hit builds, they're obviously going to get a lot of item damage, and you know, I can't exactly, like on hit builds, you are still auto attacking people, right? It's like, what's the difference fundamentally between an on hit build getting a lot of damage from its items and then a crit build getting a lot of damage from its items, right? Both of them are auto attacking you and getting damage from that. So I'm not talking about like on hit builds. I'm not talking about things like Blighter King, Kraken Slayer. Even though I do think those are issues, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about items that are just sort of adding additional damage, and those seem to be getting a bit crazy right now. I don't think Riot has really run the numbers, so to speak, on those. But that's definitely, to go back to where I was going, that's definitely one thing that I think is an issue. The fact that there is just so much damage coming from items, particularly after Riot said we are not going to, we're going to ensure that damage isn't coming from items. We're going to ensure that the damage is coming from champions' kits. And then I'm playing Aatrox or I'm playing Kled and I'm obliterating people, just absolutely massacring them with a lethality build. Like, amounts of damage that I stopped to think to myself, and I'm like, this just isn't fair, right? And at the end of the day, you start thinking to yourself, well, maybe, you know, maybe there should have been a Mythic system here. Maybe I shouldn't be able to combine Serilda's with Profane Hydra. It feels good. It's a great build. It feels good to play. But then you look at what it does to your enemies and you're like, ugh, right? That's just my thoughts on that. So I did say earlier, I said classes right now basically have a Mythic system anyway. And by that, what I mean, every class right now seems to have 1, 2, or 3 items that if you are playing that class, you must build that item. I'm talking about the infinity edge of every class, the death cap of every class, okay? I'm talking items like, if you are playing that class, you will build this item. It will fill your slot. You don't really have a choice. You must go it, okay? And I think that Riot was trying to steer away from that, ensure that those sorts of items wouldn't enter the game. But boy, they either intentionally lied and then added items like that into the game anyway, or they were just so bad at designing items that they added these items that everyone must build anyway, and they just like didn't notice that they were doing it or something. I don't really know. But let's talk about the classes. Okay. So for mages, every mage is going Death Cap, every mage is going Hourglass, every mage is going Void Staff. Some mages are going with that bloom item that heals people, but I'm gonna be honest. The loss of damage from Death Cap, or sorry, the loss of damage from Void Staff doesn't really, like, you're going from 40% spell vamp on the Void Staff, or the second item they added gives you 30% pen, but you heal people on kill, right? But the heal is not that big, and losing 10% penetration on a mage is like a big deal. Particularly if you're a fed mage and your opponents are starting to go Kanik Rookern, right? Like, and they have like 150, 200 magic resist. You're starting to look at that and you're like, wow, that extra 10% penetration sure would be really good right about now, right? So every mage is going Void Staff, Death Cap, Hourglass. That really hasn't been changed from their item system update. They said many times, we are not going to add items that every class must go. And then, wow, okay, so they didn't even touch mages. All three items must be built by every single mage. Worse yet, Death Cap is even more of a rush item now. So I'm seeing lots of builds where people are going Death Cap second. So Death Cap, like, what's the right way to put this? In the past, you could often go with like a second kind of damage item. Like, you could go Storm Surge into Lichbane, just as one example, right? Like, you build 2 AP damage items back to back, right? But once you put Death Cap onto your champion, it becomes pretty obvious that you know, once you have Death Cap, the next step is screw it. You're just going to go Void Staff or you're going to go Hourglass, right? So we're seeing lots of mages who are just building one item, be it Ludens or some other thing like that, right? And if they go Death Cap second, then it's just, okay, screw it. Then you just go into the 3-item build because, you know, now that you have Death Cap, you might as well just go Hourglass. You might as well just go Void Staff, complete your build, and kill everybody, and also be invulnerable and have armor, right? So on mages, they definitely did not address this problem. AD assassins, likewise, have a similar problem. Every single AD assassin is going Sereldas, obviously, because they just blatantly made it the best item for AD assassins. Like, it's not even close. If you were playing an AD assassin, you go Sereldas. Whereas in the past you had the choice to like not go a percent pen item, or maybe you could go Black Cleaver, something like that, right? Like nowadays you go Sereldas. You have no choice. It is so much better than any other lethality item because of how they itemized it, right? If you're going lethality, you must in fact build a Sereldas. As for Profane Hydra is in a similar issue. If you have gone lethality, I literally see no reason, and most people are doing this, there's no reason to not go Profane Hydra if you have gone with a lethality build. If you have that much attack damage already in your kit, then an extra 150% is going to massacre people, especially because Profane Hydra has 20 ability, has 60 damage, and 18 lethality. Now, there is a problem where I do believe lethality is currently undercost in item stats. A lot of people they look at like the item efficiency and they go, Profane Hydra is only 100% cost efficient. It's not even that big a deal, right? But the problem is lethality seems to just be like ludicrously under cost in item like worth right now. In fact, let me look this up just because I want to double check it. 18 lethality is currently worth 225 gold. To keep this in perspective for some of you guys, that would mean that an additional 10% to 11% damage, because 18 lethality, when you math that out, it's about 10 to 11% damage, depending on how much armor your opponent has, right? You could get 10% more damage for 225 gold. To keep this into perspective, that means if an item was made only out of lethality and it was only 100% gold efficient, you could get 180 lethality for 2,250 gold. That is insane. And I'm just mentioning this here because there's a serious problem right now with lethality itemization. Lethality is blatantly too good. And it's why these lethality items are being built on like everyone. It's why half the bruisers are swapping over to lethality. When you compare health to lethality, it's like a no-brainer. It's not even close. You can get enough health. Like you can spend 2,000 gold to increase your health by like 50%, or you can get 2,000 health to literally double your damage output. And it's pretty obvious that with these lethality builds, that yes, your damage is like double. I swear to you, it's like the lethality builds have like double the damage of a bruiser build. It's like not even close. And the defensiveness of a bruiser build is just. But I'm going to move past this, okay? We're talking about items that are required. So Sereldas is required. Profane Hydra is required. So realistically, we yoinked out the Mythic system, but instead of having like 3 choices on first items to build, now you have 2 items that you must go every single game. And is this system better? So, you know, people will say, well, Riot didn't do this, but they kind of did. Sereldas now scales on lethality. So if you go lethality, you must go Sereldas. And I'm not saying lethality champions didn't build Sereldas in the past, but now it's just like, you'd be a goddamn moron to not go Serylda's, right? Like, it's stupid. You're an idiot if you don't go Serylda's. And Profane Hydra, because it scales so hard on damage, you'd be an idiot to not go Profane Hydra. You'd have to be a stupid moron to be playing a lethality champion and not have Profane Hydra. I can think of there's maybe one or two. I think there's maybe one or two lethality champions that don't go Profane Hydra. And that's it. And I'm including like all the bruisers and all that stuff. So yeah. The second problem here, and I think a lot of people have noticed this. Well, you know what? I'll just skip past this. Okay, so we've gone over mages. We've gone over AD assassins. Let's go over bruisers. So if you're doing a bruiser build, what item are you going? You guessed it. Every single bruiser, every one of them is going Sundered Sky. You cannot play bruisers without being Sundered Sky. And I think Riot screwed this one up a little bit. Because Sundered Sky is so strong, but you get it first, it means right now bruisers are power spiking really hard on Sundered Sky and then slowly falling off. Why is that? Because you notice how I just mentioned all these mage items and all these AD assassin items that scale really good and complement each other. For bruisers, you have Sundered Sky and then you kind of have like Sterix Gauge, I guess, for late game. And that's it. And to be blunt, the problem right now that we're experiencing is like Riot didn't properly do this itemization in a way where bruiser items synergize with each other well enough. Spear Asocian is like good, but it's like a very standalone item, right? If Spear Asocian had like scaling or some benefit for other items, it might be built more. But right now, it's pretty rare to even see a Spear Asocian in your games unless you're playing like the two, meta champions who are kind of going it, right? So Sundered Sky, you see every game. Titanic Hydra, you see all the time, right? The other item I would say bruisers are basically always going to go is Sterix Gauge. Because, to be blunt, they made Sterix Gauge give tenacity. They made it scale with health, which is the primary stat of bruiser items. So once again, Sterix Gauge scales really, really good with bruisers. But the problem here, and I'm going to kind of use this space to complain about bruiser itemization and how Riot kind of screwed the pooch on this one. The problem that a lot of people are experiencing, and I think this is kind of a big issue, is that a lot of bruisers are actually not going Sterix Gauge, despite the fact that Sterix Gauge is like a core item that you should be very excited to get. It doesn't have the same heavy hitting power of other kind of like late game items for classes, right? If you get Serylda's on a lethality champion, you obliterate your enemies, right? If you get Deathcap Void Staff on a mage, you obliterate your enemies, right? If you get Sterix Gauge on a bruiser, you're like a little bit tankier and you have some tenacity. Like, it's good, no doubt. I'm not saying it's bad, but I'm just saying it lacks the impact. There's definitely a problem right now with bruiser scaling. Bruisers, again, Sundered Sky is really goddamn strong and it power spikes really goddamn hard. But other than Sundered Sky, bruisers are really struggling. But, I'm going to move on from that, and we're going to continue to talk about what items they must build. Bruisers right now, they must build Sundered Sky in literally every situation, and they must build Sterix Gauge in like 80 to 90% of situations. I think Sterix Gauge was supposed to be better. I'm not saying it's bad, but I think it was supposed to be a required item, which, kind of goes into the problem here. Why, if the whole point of the Mythic system is to remove these items that you must build and to make this system more freeform, then why must every mage build these 3 items? Why must every lethality champion build these 2 items? And why must every bruiser build these 2 items, right? I mean, we are seeing Sundered Sky built on champions that really have no business building an item like that. It's being built on champions like, Irelia, which, yeah, sure, it's good. It gives you a crit, it gives you health, it gives you healing, right? But like at the end of the day, shouldn't Irelia as a champion be focused more on things like Wit's End or Blight of the Ruined King or, just stuff like that, right? Even items like Terminus, shouldn't they be more focused on that sort of stuff? But instead, they're all going into Sundered Sky because it's just so good. Like, it's just, Yeah, and I think that's a problem. Now, look, if anyone's listening to all this and you're thinking, oh, he's advocating we nerf Sundered Sky. Well, no, obviously I'm not advocating we nerf Sundered Sky. No more than I'm saying we should nerf Death Gap. No more than I'm saying we should nerf Infinity Edge. No more than I'm saying we should nerf Cyrildas. I'm saying all these items are must build, right? So what they do with the Mythic item system, what I'm completing my thoughts here, is that like in Terminus, I'm just going to skip through here on 80 carries, right? Are you doing an on-hit build? You're going Terminus 100% of the time, no choice. Are you doing a crit build? Then you're going Infinity Edge 100% of the time, no choice, right? And that's just what I'm saying right now, is that every single build right now has items you must go 100% of the time. Now, that's not a bad thing inherently, I don't think. Builds having caps on them, like this is my capstone item. This makes my build scale into late game. This is what makes it good, right? Like even tanks have it now. Jack Show. Every tank goes Jack Show. Is it a bad thing? Probably not. It's probably not a bad thing that tanks have a scaling item. It's probably not a bad thing that bruisers have a scaling item, that on-hit champions have a scaling item. Like it's not a bad thing that these builds have a capstone item. It's just like, what was, I guess my question here, and I guess what I'm asking everyone here is like, is it better? I'm not even taking a stance here. I'm just taking a note here that it is odd that when they removed the Mythic item system, they then went through and ensured that every single class now has items that they must build every single time. And I've, for mages, Death Cap, Void Staff, Hourglass. For 80 Assassins, Profane Hydra, Cyrildas, right? For Bruisers, Sundered Sky, Sterix Gauge. For 80 carries, Lord Dominic's Regards, and then either Terminus or Infinity Edge. For tanks, Jack Show, right? For supports, you don't get items, you're not cool enough, okay? So that's all I'm saying about this Mythic item system. So I do think that it being removed probably freed up some space, freed up some, let's call it like, oh god, there's a term for this. Basically, each game has a limited pool of knowledge. Knowledge creep depth, something. It's a Magic the Gathering term. Basically, if you make a game too complicated, people can't learn it. So you have a cap. You have a ceiling on how much knowledge your game can have, right? So removing Mythics and removing the knowledge of Mythics, that's probably a good thing for League, right? So I guess I am talking myself into saying removing the Mythic item system was good. I guess when I put it in that perspective, it was a good thing. If it wasn't really contributing that much, and it does remove burden of knowledge, and it frees up some knowledge space for other things, removing it, I guess, was probably a good thing. It's just my concern now, going forward, is does every class now start to build the same? If every on-hit 80 carry is building Terminus, if every bruiser is building Sundered Sky and Sterix, all these builds are kind of like converging into one super build, right? Everyone's starting to feel like a mage. Mages have been a problem for 14 years now. Every mage builds those 3 items every single time, nonstop, right? And now it feels like that design mentality is now being applied to other classes. It's like Riot looked at Infinity Edge and Lord Dominic's being built on every 80 carry, and they said other classes should be like that too. One of the things I liked about Bruisers was that they were the most free-form class, that they made up their builds to suit the game. But now it seems more and more that Bruiser builds aren't being made up to suit the game. They're being made to just, to check a box, right? Oh, I have my Sundered Sky. I have my Sterix. Am I an on-hit champion? I have my Titanic Hydra, that sort of stuff. So, oh well, what are you going to do? I guess some people like that, and it does keep the game simple. And if the game is simple, then more people can play it. Then if more people play it, then more people watch my videos and enjoy content. So, oh well, I guess that works out. I think I finally bored myself of talking to myself about this. So, let me know about any of your thoughts, right? Like, what do you think about anything I just said? Do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? What do you think about anything I just said? So, oh well. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for being here. Hope you enjoyed watching along. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.